that could really account for the fact that he feels so old. I think they really want him to seem like he's years older. And so in that instance, I think he just thinks that he's offering her a kingdom. She is his queen, and I have a feeling that he really wanted her. He loved her purity, he loved her simplicity, he loved the part of himself that used to be that before all of the political... I mean, look at how he fights with the church in the scene for his son. There is something there that's worthy of her love. And I think why she's able to keep going. There's something that commands her respect. But in the case of the scene with the Inquisitor, he loses as a father because he's also a king, just as she loses as a lover, as a wife, whatever, because she is a queen. Yes, everything is offered up to position in life. When she agrees to meet Carlo, taking a note, well, you know, here's the letter from the queen, then here's a note. Yes, that's dangerous. Isn't it? Right there. I mean, that's a very... But it's all rampant. I mean, it's all basically Don Carlo is an opera of emotions at the surface, threatening to boil over. And the music and the solemnity and the motion and the words all try to keep it in prison. And it's by those exact same mediums that it boils over, which is a fantastic device. So when he comes in, it was traditional that if you were in a circular formation and you approached the queen, you had to state your business. So his reason to come in with the page arriving with this hurried kind of such and such, she knew that something juicy was coming. She knew she wouldn't be privy to it, but she knew that she would then already start the little serpents in trying to find out what it really meant. Signal he's saying that I have a letter marked official with the seal, the royal seal, so that it almost makes everybody already clear away and immediately have bigger ears from a distance. So that when he comes over, if it's staged correctly, he should be able to, on giving it to her, have it sticking out of the top, or have it given to her in the palm as he hands it. There are many ways of presenting it to a royal personage with the other paper. And if she grabs it and is intelligent, she can do both without being seen. It's tricky, but it's fantastic because it should give an inattention to the scene. But then she has a decision to make. Yeah, which you don't really see enough because the more flamboyant character of Eboli is generally attracting too much attention. It is a trio. And generally the music is not properly nuanced at that particular point to give enough room to the Elisabetta's trial and error in the corner. That she's going through this tremendous, should I not, I'm praying, oh God, please to forgive me. Ah, yes, I have absolutely nothing but pure thought. Yes, I can view this most impure note with the purest of eyes. And so she opens it. But it's a fantastic thing that's usually ignored entirely. Too bad, because it really is the major conflict in the scene. It's in that moment. I would have her at the front of the stage, absolutely, almost in the lap of the audience, going through her problem, while the other two were, as it's written, upstage, talking, displaying more or less how is the court in France, how is this, won't you tell me something. It's all background, and yet it does take the premier melody with Elizabeth's tone note as the underneath. But it's very difficult to stage and still allow, because also in that zone of the voice, unless you really do most unnoble sounds in the chest, you can't be heard. Sometimes I wonder if he's just a flake. I mean, what is it with this boy, you know? He lived at court too long. Maybe. He tried to grow up a very neurotic, very insecure, incredibly unhappy man. He will never be able to fit his father's shoes, even in Verdi's idea. And he's constantly looking for a way to make his name, like every young officer would go to war hoping to be able to have an episode that would make him a hero or honorable, and at that point then give him a position in society. So here he was looking for a position even though he was the king's son. Well, with a king like Philip
That's expected, because Philip wasn't grooming a successor.
Yeah, he wasn't. It was not fertile ground for anyone that would be Philip's winding sheet, because Philip intended to stay a long time. So poor Don Carlo had to fight the fact that Philip even resented his own son, which is quite spectacular when you look at royal history.
It's quite expected when you look at some royal history.
Exactly.
He sort of bursts in. It's such an almost dangerous thing for him to be doing, and he's got conflicts, and he loves her, and he's trying to be good, and she's trying to be good. What a scene between these two. And then
it's spectacular.
And then he finally collapses. I mean, just nervous collapse.
Absolutely. Which is, of course, I mean, you feel for this man, because first off, he places himself always in the wrong place at the wrong time. And yet he's wound by his heart, he's wound up by his heart, so he gets in there and he's trying to do the right thing. Io vengo a domandare grazia alla mia regina. He's going, okay, I have addressed her as the queen. I have kept her at a certain distance. And then it bothers him, the dishonesty of it, the hypocrisy of it. In many ways, it bothers anybody that's truthful of heart. She's also saying, allora, you have talked to me in this way. I will keep the game going. Mio figlio, which of course is a big mistake, because then that's what sends him over the edge for the first time. And she, even in the music, there's this halting kind of, before she addresses him, he goes off onto this, how can I possibly, and she says, listen, Prince, and the music is da 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 da, calmati, 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 calm yourself down. I've talked to the king. I imagine that you will be able to lead the troops in Flanders, or Fiandra, così, and that's it. And I believe with all my heart, I wish you good luck, and that you will leave Doman. Doman is written in its abbreviated sense with dots, which mean even for her, the idea that he leaves tomorrow is already a little tiny death. And so she leaves trying, that was it, bye-bye, thank you so much, I was glad to say, and I'm out of here because you look pretty volatile to me. And he goes to try and to stop her. And then that's when the crux of the drama comes to life in this whole scene. Because pretense stops. It becomes this melody that captures her imagination also, because they both repeat the same melody, which suggests that the music of his words and the way he said it inspires her to say it back to him. So there's a little subtle text of both of them using the same music, but to different device. It's quite beautiful.
She knows she loves him. She knows he loves her. She knows it's an impossible situation. She's facing him. It must be hell.
Well, I wouldn't want to be in her shoes. I don't know that I would be that strong. I really don't know that I would be that strong. Yes, if I were bound by something of church and state, probably. I would have to be, but I would die a little bit more obviously.
Well, she dies pretty obviously. I mean, this poor woman.
If you're good, and you realize that the French have a difficult time anyway, and I say this with all love and respect, but their music and everything is about sophisticated restraint, passionate restraint. And it's not that they don't have passion, they have more passion than I could possibly hint at in 1,000 lives, but they are more restrained about it. So here, this woman is not used to having somebody blow up in her face, which is such a typical Spanish thing to do, not suggesting they don't have control, but it is inherent in the trait that they will be more fiery. And I probably offended every Spanish and French friend that I know, but we're taking it in a not a literal general context. So she's already alarmed that he would do this kind of thing, and she's determined to keep herself in check as well as him.
One of them has to be sane.
Yes, because frankly, when he's quite so extreme, she knows that they're not going to be alone for a long time, and I think she feared that the king would return before she could really maneuver the situation into being right, and she's alone with him. But she left the page out front to say when he was coming. Only she didn't think for the page to be in two places at the same time to tell also the Countess of Erler. So that's where she goofed. And I think she only really thinks about it when he comes in and says, perché sola la regina? Which, if it's done correctly, can have an immense, already slap in the face. He speaks before he thinks. And it's strange in a man who's a royal, because they generally did not speak quite so quickly. But look at him. He's like immediately ready to send that woman away.
This is just not something that deserves it all. She's
No,
holding
but what's beautiful is the beautiful sense we get a little hint of how this woman is surviving in her current situation. When he says, Countess of Arenberg leaves, that's it. She, from that moment, musically, physically, I would hope, and emotionally, makes them go to like pale to a fade. They no longer exist, the court, because she paints a vision of what her friend is going to, the pain that she is to carry back, the stories of her sacrifice, the fact that she will always be with her in a petite way. And please don't tell so many people that I am so sad, which of course is maybe a subtle invitation to let it be known all over the court, because she also can't get word to her mother the true situation. So in that scene, it's beautiful how Verdi, in a way, smudges the window for her to be able to just look in once more to her homeland. And then in the end, when she does that magnificent phrase that is supposed to top everyone in the ensemble, the piano phrase, nel mio core, in my heart. That's the heart trying to fly out of the situation, and of course it can't. And then it's the reiteration of her melody, which suggests she's back into the Queen, she's back into where she is, and she exits.
You're listening to a discussion about Elisabetta from Verdi's Don Carlo with soprano Aprile Millo on Through the Opera Glass on WBAI in New York. King Philip has just banished the Countess of Arenberg, Elisabetta's last link to her homeland.
That is the only way he can get at her, because one of the primary problems of that age was a lack of privacy. Because if you look at a court, it wasn't just one lady in waiting, it wasn't just two ladies in waiting, it was 15 ladies in waiting waking you up in the morning.
sleeping with you
we
at
have
night,
no
actually.
document to prove that 15 people came to give a wake-up call, but I'm quite sure that there was very little privacy in a palace, very little privacy. So what
For
he
the
was
Queen.
doing, yeah, but I think for practically anyone who lived at court, because everybody waited for any morsel to have anything to say, because there was no TV, there was really no theater unless it traveled to your door. It was a very, very awkward time to have anything to do.
Then how did Eboli manage?
And manage in what way?
Eboli, in order to have an affair with the king, did she go to him?
Well, see, but
did he
this is
go
the
to
double
her?
standard, because the
Naturally.
king, because he is the king, can do as he pleases. And because she was female, there is a pecking order with this, that she would normally have to, she would have a power that would be to her position, but also to her gender. If she were the sole monarch, then she would have a particular kind of privacy that would never have been possible for anyone else, evinced by Elizabeth I. But because Philip was so fanatic about how he looked, especially a Spanish gentleman, he's very concerned about appearances, and because of a self-saving face, and the whole situation, the entire court knew that she wasn't in love, knew the primary history before.
Well, she wasn't supposed to be in love. It's a political marriage.
Right, and it was changed at the last moment.
Even so, it would have been a political marriage. The fact that they fell in love has nothing to do with it.
Well, the church originally had okayed the marriage between Don Carlo and the young princess. And she, because the church feared what would eventually give him power and position at court, because he was so inflammatory and so not under the church at all, they feared that that would give him too much power, so they gave her to Philip. Very bizarre.
Scary.
Yeah, and I mean, it's more poignant to believe that when her principal, the principal handmaiden is sent away, that is the last veil to fall. That's the last bastion of anyone who would see to her secrets. So then she has to surrender her secrets to a little tiny box, which is then discovered later. And then guess who gets to be the lady in waiting? He's not stupid. He then puts Eboli in total, whereas in the chamber scene, what would have come in singing was the Countess of Arenberg. But because she's not there, the principal handmaiden is Eboli. Fascinating.
Talking about the internal workings of Elisabetta, in the Auto da Fe, So much happens to her inside at that point. She is not doing anything. She has to watch all this going on. She is watching the man she loves destroy himself, basically. When he draws on the king.
Yeah, again, this is this man's emotional instability, that, oh, he feels that that's wrong. And so he will draw a sword, of course, without really considering his station in life. He's always struggling to get out from under that because he basically does not comprehend it.
She knows that.
Yeah, there's a qui Carlo, oh ciel. She already knows immediately, oh, who let him out? Who let him here? Oh my God, how did he get here? And then Rodrigo is standing next to me, to the Regina, saying, uh-oh. And if you see that supposedly she is to gesture to Rodrigo, what are we doing here? How we can we save him? So that in the end, when Rodrigo decides to step forward to be the one true man loyal to the king, he's also the one true man loyal to Don Carlo, because he knows already ways to try and maybe get his freedom after this.
It must be hell for her to stand there next to the king.
Well, she's totally a wax figure. She's looked back and turned into a pillar of salt. There's nothing she can do. She has to be totally quiet because she's under the eyes of the entire group. And already in that magnificent counterpoint melody, the giant melody that happens, ba-da-dee-da-da, it's all caressing melody. It's not the dum-bum-beam, bum-bum-bum-bum-bum, already, which is the man kind of, here we are, we're going to state this out really fast. And she goes, Signore da ba bi ba ba bi ba ba bi ya ba 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 bi ba. It's already the juxtaposition of the male melody, which I hate to say it this way, but it is really that way, and this supplicant, the please, 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 with the public, the entire public, and the court is singing with the queen, and it's constantly on its way up the scale for the desperation of what she's saying. I made a very conscious decision in the later performances of Don Carlo that I've done, that when they start to burn the heretics in whatever production I've done, I always make her look away. Because I don't see her as one of these mindless people that can be staring at flesh burning and not have a reaction. The idea of it, I make her turn away. Because she is basically just a pawn. Although she's a queen, she's a pawn on this, in this circumstance. It is the typical big scena that then Verdi transfigures into just being the traditional thing that was needed for the Paris performance of this one and that and this one and that. He transforms it into many, many different voices expressing their horror and their passion and the progress of the drama. And finally, we also hear the people's voice. Quite a spectacular moment for them.
I get the feeling that she really wouldn't be that good at subterfuge because she is still a very much of a straight arrow type person.
When confronted, she'll tell you the truth. And that is something very precious in this character. When she's confronted in the chamber scene, she doesn't back down on it. She said, look, you knew the day that I came to you that I was promised to your son and that I married you and that this is the way it happened and I will keep it to that level. But don't ask me to be a hypocrite, because he throws the fact that he finds his portrait in her jewels in her face. It's like, yes, and you knew this well, so don't paint it out to be anything so horrible. But of course he has to have something to react.
Well, also when you look at it, he really has power of life and death over her as well as everybody
Practically
else.
anything that walked, except his own sanity, his own peace of mind.
That's, as Rodrigo says, you control everything except yourself.
Yeah.
But with her, she's walking a very fine line because he could turn the Inquisition onto her and he'd need another queen next week.
But she knows full well he won't. In a way, she's also got him in a position because it would lose face. They would have found a way if he wanted to get rid of her, but he really loved her.
Of all things, calling her an adulterer. Good heaven.
That's the only thing he can throw at her.
I know.
'Cause he knows that she's more powerful in her quiet dignity than he is in all his bombast. And you can't fight people like that. It's impossible, because they win by their silence, by their dignity, by the way they live their lives. The quartet, she has really like a lament of her situation, that she could be quite so honorable about everything, and maybe in a petite way she feels guilty for maybe the things she has thought that might have given her away, which is okay too, because everybody who's trying to outwardly be pure and live the correct life will always be a little guilty for what they're thinking. That boasted some of the greatest actresses in the world, and they did speak with that type of sing-song. So he tried to give the effect that they got on the stage by giving us a pitch, at least, so that we would know that it was basically a song that they were doing in those days. It was much more sung, the theater of prose.
I have to have a little bit of sympathy for Eberli. I mean, she does have a very volatile personality. She gets it into her head that maybe Carlo is in love with her. She takes off like Nashua out of the gate.
Exactly.
And when that turns, she has to do something, and she flies off the handle, and she's sorry later.
Very sorry.
But it's too late.
Yeah, but every mezzo-soprano in a Verdi opera always manages to fly off the handle, get somebody killed, or get somebody in trouble, and then live the rest of their lives like Amneris at the top of the tomb of the two lovers, more or less. I have sympathy for her also. And the O Don Fatale, I have jealousy for, because it's one of the most beautiful arias I have ever heard in my life. And if it is sung like a living cello, one of the greatest impressions of my musical life was hearing, on a recording, Maria Callas sings O Don Fatale. She becomes a living cello in the part of the Oh mia. Now, she was the queen of nuance in the vibrato, because it was such a magnificent dramatic voice. But she always had these scherzi di vibrato, which would show you the mental state. And when she sings, she gets a vibrato of the saddest, most poignant vibration that I have ever heard in my life, in that particular melody and in Prétend qui commence from Samson and Delilah, that I heard on the day she died. And that literally put me over the edge, because there was such the sense of Maria Callas, the woman who always wanted to be loved, who sang her entire life in search of love, not even knowing it herself, so that when she was confronted by love, it sent her over the edge. And in coming back to the original Love, the stage, she found that there was, of course, a tremendous audience that still loved her, but that there were always the brutish people that expect everybody to be perfect. Any mezzo that is really going to be worth anything to us for many years should make that a study.
You're listening to a study of the role of Elisabetta in Verdi's Don Carlo with soprano Aprile Millo on WBAI in New York. The question of what Elisabetta knows and what she indicates to the audience is rather interesting.
When you're off stage, other things are going on, and obviously somehow you know about things that are happening.
Sure. There's an interesting dichotomy in that. Yes, she will know everything that's going on, but she will not have seen it with the same eye as the public. So the public, in its response to what she says or searches for, has got to fill in her blanks. And it's interesting because you have to make a decision. Am I going to really know what has happened here to the exact word and nuance and feeling? Or am I always just going to be filling in the blanks as my character using the eyes of the public? It's a very, very complicated kind of way to look at it. And yet, yeah, I'll have heard about it, but I'll always hear of it secondhand, which means that person will be giving me their idea of what has happened, even though they're recounting facts. So she'll always have a watered-down effect. And it's interesting later on how that will play on what she decides to do. The entire opera is a series of anticlimax. After the auto da fe, everybody's already, well, that's the triumphal scene, let's go. It's like everything is anticlimactic. And then arriving around 11:30 at night is the Tu che la vanità. It's interesting with a woman that's quite so noble as this. What we get in a beautiful way in the Tu che la vanità is that she does have memories that she can crawl inside and live through. The Fontainebleau, she remembers her childhood, she remembers how beautiful it was in the garden in Fontainebleau. Also the particular moment when he said that I loved you. And she realizes that, that her problems, his problems, the entire country's problems don't amount to a hill of beans. Considering his true destiny, which is, Rodrigo, I think, also made her very keen on this, that he was following his path to greatness. Perhaps one of the most gorgeous melodies of all time opened the aria. I remember the very first time I sang it was the opening of the production when there was controversy over the fact that I replaced Mara Zampieri. And I didn't know it until basically 2 days before the opening. They told me the day after the dress rehearsal. And I saw the dress rehearsal and I thought she has a type of voice that you either love or you hate. And I happen to love the voice. I happen to find it very expressive. And as the Queen, I learned so much from this woman as an actress. She was fantastic. So a lot of my Elisabetta, if anybody likes it, is born a lot of copying what Zampieri did. And I unfortunately don't copy it as well. So eventually I'll grow into that and we'll bring to it the tremendous amount of pathos and interior dialogue that goes on when this woman is on the stage. And that it would happen in the way it happened was really awful. I mean, really awful. So I stand on the stage 2 weeks before I had really sung it into the voice, because I had just been singing it for about a month or so. And I was facing myself because I wasn't due to sing it until much later in the run. So I went on 2 weeks earlier than I was supposed to go on. And I had never sung the Tu che la vanità in public.
Oh.
Which was ridiculous when you consider the amount of chutzpah that I would have had on that first evening. And I remember that in this current production, in this beautiful John Dexter production, she's standing in front of a gate when what is like an ocean is evolving out of the orchestra. And I remember thinking, oh my God, the curtain goes up and you see the shadow of the gates on the back wall of the theater, and you also see the shadow of the curtain rising, so that you know when 8,000 eyes are upon you. Each person has two. So I thought, well, here you are, because I actually felt very comfortable the entire opera. I was to the manner born. I absolutely loved this music. I thought that I was very comfortable in it, and that it can be better, always. I was taking the ball and running with it, and I was enjoying the magnificent melodies. This Tu che la vanità is already something that leaves me destroyed listening to it in the public, because it is so magnificent. It's her final journey in front of the audience. And this curtain went up, and I thought, in a panic, this is the first time I will ever sing this in public. Do I have what it takes? I'm one of these people that respond to challenges. Especially when it's on stage, I like to show that I'm not afraid of the lion, of the great beast. I mean, many people try to tell me that, yes, I have my head in the lion's mouth, but I'm convinced that he doesn't have teeth. Now, unfortunately, when I know he has teeth, I'm quite sure I'm going to be very afraid. But to this moment, I don't feel that he has teeth. And that night, singing that magnificent music, at the end of it, I was so proud, because then the rest of it is literally just making love to the situation, the character. The music is then its most divine. I think she lives vicariously, as many women do after they've had a love affair, that's it, that they are branded with that person's name on their heart. They never love again in the same way. So she lives in her memories, or with the idea, or with the that mondo migliore that she's talking about at the end of the opera. That's what she's living for, and she lives a life that she thinks will get her ready access to that world. And in her mind, she has been taught to believe that noble sacrifice and that kind of thing is what will get you immediate access to paradise. So at the end, when she says you go, and she's this magnificent, almost martial kind of music, that's her call to arms to him, and the acceptance of his call to arm for her. So she lets him go, becoming then one of the war widows, in her own mind even, I would suggest. And it's such a noble thought that as she sings, and notice the entire opera almost comes to a complete halt before the mal lassù. Because for them, it's almost as if clouds appear and they are talking as their better halves, as their halves that were in love, but a noble, very high kind of love. So that she says, I will see you in that better world, but I will see you in my purest state, which will be worthy to be there because I sacrifice. And it drives me nuts. It's so beautiful. Elisabetta is summed up to me in the last act as is Aida. I've always been very fond of thinking that in the final death scene of these two great loves, she has always been the death angel for him from the beginning of the opera. When he embraces her at the end of the opera, he's embracing the death angel, because she's always had one foot on the earth and one foot in paradise. In many ways, Elisabetta is the same way. She's always had one foot in another world. And when she sings, she's even more direct about the music that she hears from another world. Aida says, triste canto. And we think, because we're listening with mortal ears, oh, she's talking about the sacerdoti that are singing with Amneris, isn't that too bad? She's talking about the Otera Dio, that the celestial choir is singing. So she has to sing it slower in the beginning, and then he repeats, because he's transfixed also by the beauty of the melody, and he's starting to hear it through her contact with the other world. So that when they die, they are already there. It's almost the same thing with Elisabetta, only they don't get to die together. For that one moment, that is their union, that's their marriage, that's their child, that's their love, that's their years of being together. And she says, I will see you, because here already is this beautiful sense of faith, I will see you in un mondo migliore. When I sing that, it is the culmination of practically why I sing. Because it's like it's an invitation to everyone to see and to hear what it must be like in another world. Hopefully I'll be in noble voice on that particular evening, and if not, still the music is great enough to take you there. But that's an invitation to all of us that listen. We can either go or we can stay. I like the 5-act version better than the 4.
Yeah?
Much. Mm-hmm. I love to sing the 4-act version because it's a passeggiata, it's just a walk. Because you lose that whole first scene, which I think really makes much more sense, but it's easier on the public to see the 4.
Yeah, but it's not good opera.
I don't think necessarily to make it longer it has to be, but you could have special critical editions that are done every once in a while that do the 5-act. But the 4-act version works just as well. It's just you miss all that wonderful nuance.
I think if I were to walk into a theater and be faced with Don Carlo for the first time, it would have to be the 5-act version. Because
well,
it
I have
gives
to tell you my first experience with the Don Carlo as a viewer. I was in Munich, and I was privileged to see a performance of Jose Carreras in tremendously good form, Mirella Freni, who I thought really stunningly sang this for many years. And I sat down, and in Munich, especially in Europe, but in Germany especially, there is a sepulchre quiet that comes over an auditorium. It's like a religious experience to these people. And for that I am eternally grateful, because that is the way to see an opera. They're not afraid to applaud, which
They're
they do.
supposed to. Yes.
Which they do, and then at the end of the performance, it's 45 minutes if you touch them. I mean, that's the way to understand music.
And they know when to applaud.
Yeah, they're not stupid. They really are not stupid. And if they really love you, they're very loyal. They see you through moments when you are not quite so happy. So I've observed, because I've watched a lot of opera in Germany. I like it, but not when they don't go crazy with the productions. If they go crazy, I'm out the door. But when they give these religiously beautiful, quiet before a performance, you can only love them. And I remember the feeling. It opens with the scene in which he's praying. And you hear a deep amena grisitor. The whole coro of men are singing. And I can't tell you the effect that it had in the theater to start it that way, because the heart of the matter of this opera is the Inquisition. The freedom that is religion made prison. By man-made subterfuge, by man-made usage of what is the most glorious thing in the world. And here you're confronted already with the monks singing. And that magnificent melody that everything is. To me, it became literally, I said, oh my, this is a very important piece. Duh. It was a very important piece.
Yeah. God, so much of Verdi is so political. I mean, he just...
He was very awake, this man. I liked him very much
Yeah.
for his sense of, not political correctness, his sense of pique. He would get at people in his music, in the very best sense of the word.
But with what drama? What he chose to do. The
I
things
always
he-
loved that he made his most stupid character so beautiful by the music. Think of how ridiculous the jealousy of Othello is, and how transfigured the music is. I am like Verdi only in, if I may compare myself, how I am emotionally destroyed at the end of Othello. And it was said that he wept bitterly when he finished it. He really didn't want to leave them. And I'm in the same way when I sang my very first Othello. I took over for Kiriti Kanawa. And it was the very first time I'd ever sung it, but I sang it so many times as a child listening to Tebaldi's recording that on the stage that was it. I turned myself into a living disc. I tried, because there's no way you can repeat the glory that was Renato Tebaldi, that is to this day. But I really did try to give the nuance and the style. And I remember reaching the end of the performance. I had offered it to my father, who was at that time really in the process of fixing to leave this earth, and also Placido's family. Either his mother or his father was quite sick, or both. And I remember that at the end, we both got up very slowly, and he hugged me very strong, and I hugged him equally strong. And it was like two children with sick parents who had offered their whole heart and soul, doing what they knew their parents would love them to do. And they had actually ascended an Olympian heights for their parents. We were hysterical crying. People had to drag us to the front of the stage. And I have people who, of course, do these wonderful pirate tapes that still talk about that with like tears in their eyes, because I think they understood the audience. The beginning, the love duet, was so beautifully real and beautifully sung. And all the old people who understand the way Othello is supposed to be sung, there's an interior love that has to come into the melody. And they also saw that there was chemistry between Placido. It was one of the first times I ever sang with Placido. And I will never forget it.
You know, there's one thing that Verdi does that really strikes me. When he has someone say someone's name, whether it's Otello or Carlo,
Yeah.
there has to be, for me, a magic in the way all the love, everything, all the emotion has to be in that name. And I wonder if he knew what he was writing, or if it was just a lot of sopranos who figured it out later.
No. Every single thing he wrote had its proper nuance in even how you say it in Italian. I mean, this man was a genius, and what he did underneath, the counter melodies underneath, in the scene of the Si pel ciel, where they're batting away in an incredibly violent fashion as to how they're going to reckon with what he considers the adulteress, the infidelity. The jealousy is eating him alive, and Iago is winning with a sweet smile.
Oh, yes.
Si pel ciel, brum. Constantly you have the orchestra in a glissando for the brass, which is unbelievable. If I have said this right, I hope so. Either way, it looks like we're giving smacks in the face constantly to the innocence, the beauty, everything that is pure and beautiful about the love that Otello had for Desdemona. Even so much so, before they start scaling that height in the Si pel ciel, they have her motif, where it's almost as if she's literally musically begging them to come to their senses, which then again they swatted away the entire time. He's made up of constant little light motifs, as someone else we know used to use that a lot, but later Verdi.
Well, Verdi had all the Wagner scores.
Sure.
As soon as they came out, he had them.
They had a tremendous respect for each other.
Oh, sure.
But I love Wagner's effect on Verdi, if I may be so bold, and I absolutely adore Verdi's effect on Wagner, too. So geniuses have a way of showing a different reflection in each other.
Cross-pollinating.
Yeah.
Let's talk for a second about the different ways of performing because there are certain things, when you see Verismo opera, you want the blood and the guts and the
realism.
sweat.
Right.
And there aren't many people who are doing that anymore. It's
No, they
considered
don't understand it at all.
in bad taste. You know?
Well, frankly, everything about today is in bad taste. We are inundated in American television and practically anywhere else with things that will make us smell good, because God forbid we should smell human. We are told that we should keep our teeth white, that we should basically be as adult children, be seen and not heard. The theater itself, to me, is a temple, but it's a temple with living converts, with people who adore the music.